Florida has two kinds of missing people: the ones who vanish loudly and the ones who disappear so quietly the world doesn't even notice they're gone. Tonight, we're talking about the second kind. Two women, both long dead before anyone realized they were missing. Two cases separated by 15 years. One buried in a shallow grave in the woods. One sunk at the bottom of a backyard swimming pool. Each wrapped in layers of silence, half-truths, and people who fled just a little too quickly. This is the story of Jenna Burris and the story of Cindy Rogers. Two names Florida forgot until their graves spoke louder than their lives were ever allowed to. In February of 2007, in a quiet corner of Sarasota known as Ashton Court, a landscaper noticed something strange in a patch of woods beside a row of tiny suburban homes. The soil looked disturbed, just a shallow patch of earth, barely a few inches deep. At first, he thought it might be an animal burial, perhaps a dog, maybe a raccoon or a cat. What he found instead were human bones, tangled in the kind of grave someone digs in a hurry. The sheriff's office collected what was left, much more than a skeleton, scraps of clothing, and silence. No purse, no ID, no witnesses, no missing persons reports that matched. And for 15 years, those remains sat in storage, labeled only as Unidentified Female, 2007. Detectives eventually learned through forensics that the woman had been in her late 30s. They estimated she died sometime between 2005 and 2007. But without DNA matches, the case just froze. What made it even worse was that this woman, whoever she was, seemed to belong to no one. No one had filed a report. No one had called police. No one had asked for her. It was as if she had lived and died completely invisible. Then in 2022, the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office partnered with DNA Labs International. They uploaded the woman's DNA into databases, hoping for some sort of match, a distant cousin, maybe a sibling, someone. What they got was a match, but not because anyone went looking for her. A relative's DNA had been collected in an entirely different investigation. Detectives have never released the relative's identity or the details of that case, only that a sample unexpectedly connected to their long-dead Jane Doe. As if a ghost was reaching out through someone else's tragedy. The remains were identified as Jenna Lynn Burris, 39 years old, a mother of a son, a wife to a man named James Burris. And here is where the entire case went from tragic to deeply suspicious. Detectives learned Jenna was last known to be alive around 2005 to 2006, living in a house on Tampa Road in Sarasota with her husband James and their small son. Jenna didn't drive. She didn't work. She relied completely on James. And yet, James never reported her missing. When investigators tracked down James, they found a man whose story changed every single time police spoke to him. At one point, James claimed Jenna just walked away. At another, he said he thought she had gone back to her family. And then, in a detail that truly chilled the detectives, Jenna's now grown son told officers he had spent most of his life believing his mother had abandoned the family. After all, that was the story his father had told him, except Jenna hadn't walked away. She hadn't just gone home to family. She hadn't just started a new life. Jenna had been buried for years in the same county James had suddenly left right after she vanished. Detectives described James' movements as abrupt, not a normal move, not a job relocation. It was as if he was a man running, leaving Florida for California, and quickly leaving California for Maryland. He still lives to this day. Detectives also discovered that around the time James was in California, someone had placed a Crime Stopper tip in that area referencing Gina's disappearance. This is well before anyone knew who the Ashton Court victim was. And when police asked James about it, he said he didn't remember. A convenient memory lapse. So here's what police believe today. They believe Jenna's death, it's officially a homicide. Her killer has never been charged. Her burial site suggests panic. Her missing person status never filed. Well, that suggests something worse. Intention. And the most haunting detail? For 15 years, Jenna Burris lay hidden in those woods. Not because her killer was clever, but because nobody in her life even bothered to say she was gone. She was only found because of another case, someone else's tragedy, that forced a DNA sample into the system. Florida didn't find Jenna. Another ghost did. Now let's jump back to April the 7th, 1992. 15 years before Jenna's bones were discovered. Let's go to a little house on Gallup Avenue in Sarasota, Florida. It's a quiet street. A few palm trees, faded stucco walls. Houses are so close together that you can hear your neighbor sneeze through the fence. And in the backyard of one of them, a single-story home at 4580 Gallup Avenue. A plastic garbage can was floating gently in the swimming pool. Well, at first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Florida homes collect junk like tourists collect sunburns. But something about that trash can looked wrong. Heavy. Weighted. The lid was tied down. When the police were called and they opened it, a smell pushed out. It wasn't chlorine, wasn't decay, but something older, dry, settled, rot. Death had been waiting a long time. Inside that garbage can was the body of Cindy Rogers. And Cindy had been dead Cindy Rogers was last seen in 1991, living at that very same house. According to her friends, she'd been in the process of moving out, packing, sorting, making plans. And then, just like that, she was gone. Now, people asked about her. People wondered where she went. But no one knew she was still there, in the backyard, in that swimming pool, sealed inside a plastic tomb. The most chilling part, medical examiners determined Cindy had been dead much longer than she had been in that pool. Meaning the killer had kept her body somewhere else for months, maybe even longer, before disposing of it in the most bizarre way imaginable. Why the pool? Why a trash can? Why now? Signs point to a killer who panicked late, not early. Neighbors told detectives the house always had people coming and going, tenants, visitors, arguments, slamming doors. Cindy was trying to leave that revolving door environment when she disappeared. And whoever killed her, they knew the house, knew the pool, knew the schedule, knew how to wait until the exact right moment to drag a long-dead woman onto that property, seal her inside a garbage can, and then drop her in the pool like a piece of unwanted furniture. Detectives believe that killer assumed the pool water would degrade the evidence or somehow hide the timeline. But instead, it told a much different story. Cindy was killed long before she was dumped. That meant the trash can, it wasn't the scene of the crime. It was the killer's last mistake. A body hidden in plain water. The image of that trash can quietly bumping against the pool wall, sunlight glittering on the water above a woman who'd been forgotten for a year. Well, it became one of Sarasota's darkest symbols. This wasn't just a murder. It was an erasure. Somebody wanted Cindy to disappear so completely that her body didn't even make it into the pool for an entire year. Cindy's case remains unsolved, but detectives believe the killer lived in that house or spent enough time there to hide Cindy's body until they were ready to move it. Someone on Gallup Avenue knows what happened. They knew in 1991. They knew in 1992. And the odds say they still know today. 2 women, 2 forgotten graves, one buried in the woods, her name silenced for 15 years. One hidden in a trash can, floating under the Florida sun. Both surrounded by people who either looked away or walked away at exactly the wrong time. Now, Florida doesn't forget easily, but sometimes it takes the dead speaking through bones, DNA, garbage bin tombs to remind us who they are. Jenna Lynn Burris, Cindy Rogers, 2 Florida ghosts, still waiting for the truth. But before we sign off tonight, won't you pour yourself one last glass of Bucklesberry lemonade? And let's go down 2 more forgotten Florida roads where 2 young girls vanished and the truth still refuses to come home, and they want their stories told. In the dead still heat of a Florida autumn, where the palominos rattle like bones in a burlap sack, children once said you could still hear the soft clatter of a leash dragging somewhere in the woods of Tonatassa, Florida. A lonely sound, like something looking for someone who never came home. Her name was Gail Lorraine Joyner, 13 years old, hair sun-bleached thin as corn silk, with a furry friend perched on her shoulder that made folks stop and stare. Bandit, the pet raccoon. She loved more fiercely than most people love anything. And when she walked, he waddled. When she laughed, he chittered. They were a strange pair moving through a strange place. Florida back then wasn't just hot, it was haunted. Not by ghosts, but by the emptiness between towns, by the woods that breathed, by the dirt roads that swallowed things whole. Gail had only been in that world for a few months before she disappeared, fresh out of Michigan, newly enrolled at the local junior high. She came home from school on September 22nd, 1972, ate her sandwich just like any other day, then set out barefoot to walk bandit along the familiar edge of woods behind her house. Now, neighbors later recall seeing her near a white car idling where the road met the tree line, but no one saw her get inside. No one saw her run. No one saw Bandit return. The sheriff's department, desperate for leads, they bought Gail's parents 17 raccoon carcasses, thinking just maybe Bandit had come to some terrible end and might could offer a clue. But Bandit, he had a burn on one paw and a scrape across his nose. Marks his family just couldn't forget. Not one of those bodies matched Bandit. Something else had taken him. Something else had taken Gail. Her parents believed someone had charmed their daughter by charming her raccoon. Kneeling down, praising the little creature, offering trust the way some people offer candy. Gail wasn't the type to wander. She wasn't the type to just run away. She was the type to show you her pet, smile shyly, then follow wherever kindness seemed to point. And that's often how evil walks in Florida. Soft-voiced, curious, gentle enough just to keep its teeth hidden. 3 years later, in 60 miles north, another girl vanished under the same Florida sun. Susan Basili, just 12 years old, rode the school bus home through Port Orange on June 10th, 1975. The kind of route where pine trees blur past the windows like dark green bars. Now, she usually walked with a friend, but that day she stepped off the bus alone, turning down a dirt road that locals said could feel a little too quiet at times. A witness later claimed they saw Susan being shoved into a dark blue Chevrolet van, the kind with orange curtains that looked like they belonged in a roadside carnival. Two men, one barely out of boyhood, the other with the extra 10 years of shadow behind his eyes. The van had one word painted on it, Aries. Then it was gone. And so was Susan. Her path home remained dusty and undisturbed, just as though she dissolved into thin air. For both Gail and Susan, Rumors swirled like mosquitoes, thick, relentless, and impossible to kill. And floating somewhere among those rumors was the name of a man who liked to confess to things. Sometimes truthfully, sometimes not. A man who filled notebook pages with stories about girls he claimed to have taken. A man who found a sort of hideous fame in the darkness of his own making. But this story, it isn't about him. This story belongs to Gail and Susan. Because long before his name appeared in the newspapers, the woods were already whispering about Susan and Gail. Long before he led deputies to empty lots and overbuilt fields, mothers were already warning their daughters not to walk alone. And long before his execution in 1998, Florida had already learned a hard truth. Monsters don't create missing girls. Missing girls create monsters. Because we all need something to blame. There's an image that lingers in both cases, like a watermark left by grief on the pages of a memory. For Gail, a leash held loosely in her hand. A raccoon, a child whose joy could be stolen simply by someone pretending to admire it. For Susan, a road stretching ahead like a promise. The hum of a school bus pulling away. Silence that came too quickly. Two girls walking home under the same burning sky, in different towns, in different years. Two girls swallowed by the same kind of Florida wilderness. One leafy, one sandy, both being watched. The police searched, the parents begged, the towns whispered. And the Florida darkness with its swamps and sawgrass and heavy, suffocating air, it held its secrets close. Gail's siblings waited for word that never came. Susan's family walked the road where she'd vanished, looking for anything. A hair tie, a notebook, maybe a scrap of fabric. Something that would say she'd been real, that the world really hadn't lost her to a hole it could no longer find. Some nights they say the wind through the pine trees of Port Orange sounds like a girl calling for help. Some nights the rustling beside the Tanatasa woods sounds like the soft steps of a raccoon trying to lead someone home. But these are the things that desperate hearts want to hear. The truth is simpler, sadder, and darker. Florida does remember it's missing. The land keeps their stories, even when people forget. And somewhere between these two lonely paths, one with a raccoon leash dragging through the leaves, the other with footprints abruptly ending in dirt, lies the shadow of a question that Florida still cannot answer. How do two girls vanish in daylight in towns where everyone knows everyone and leaves nothing behind but rumors, grief, and the uneasy feeling that something hungry once lived in the woods and might still be out there? Some stories end with closure. Unfortunately, this story ends with a door left open. This has been Tim Eubanks with the Bucklesberry Lemonade Podcast. If you know anything about these cases, even if it's small, please contact the proper authorities. And until next time, lock your doors, turn your porch light on, and hug a loved one. Stay safe, guys.